I'm Aaron Graber with Ventrac, and it's yard fixing season again. Seems like every year we end up doing something like this because this is the time of year where it's best to establish new grass. But the property we're on today is a unique situation. So there was a utility pole that got hit by a car last fall, and what that ultimately did was take out a lot of utilities that go to this house. So the power company and a few others had to come in and trench through this person's established yard and get all that stuff reconnected to the house, fix it all. And anyone who's ever had that work done will know that when the utility company comes through and fixes those things, they leave a mess when they're done. They don't finish things out, they don't put it back to normal, they just get the utilities in the ground and functioning. So that's why we're here. And our goal today is to use all of these attachments to put this yard back to normal so that in a few weeks it'll look like we were never even here and none of this ever happened. In order to do that, I have got the perfect suite of equipment, starting with the 4520 Pro on dual wheels so that all the work that I do today doesn't do any more damage to the property around it. We've had a lot of rain recently, the ground is pretty soft and wet, and it's springtime when you want to be doing this planting. That means you have a couple choices as a contractor to be able to come in and fix this. You can use something like Ventrac, and it's the perfect equipment solution, or you can use handwork or heavier equipment. Obviously with the handwork, it's gonna take forever to do this and it's gonna be backbreaking labor. You're probably gonna have to end up billing more to the customer because of the time that it takes, and the results aren't gonna be as good. And if you use heavy equipment, you risk doing more damage to the property, especially in conditions like this. For the contractor, they're gonna follow a similar example to how I'm working today. I drove one truck and trailer here and got one tractor with every attachment I need to get this job done. And if you're more on the property maintenance side and you had this equipment in the maintenance barn, it's nice and easy to maintain everything because you only have one machine and all of the attachments are dedicated to their purpose and last a long time because of it. All right, I'm ready to get working, but before we do that, I want to take a walk around to the equipment that we have and explain the very specific attachments that we brought for this purpose so that everybody can see exactly how we're going to tackle this job. Let's talk about all the equipment I brought with us today. Firstly, I've got a 4520 Pro, and the reason I brought this machine is because I didn't want to think about it at all, what kits we had on the tractor and what attachments we'd be able to run. I just wanted to say, no matter what attachment I'm bringing, I want to be able to run it, so 4520 Pro. You'll also see a bucket on the front of the tractor. That's there just because I unloaded the trailer that way, but what I'm ultimately going to do is put the bucket on the back side and have it on the 3-in-1 so that I have the use of the bucket during using other attachments if I need it. There was dirt brought in for this property, but we actually took a look at the site and decided that we're not going to use any dirt additionally to the area. So the bucket's probably not going to get used a whole lot, but if I am working up next to things and I need to shift dirt around or move something out of my way, that'll be a useful tool. So again, I'm going to have that on the back of the tractor. I'll have it up and out of the way most of the time, and then I'll be working with the other attachments. The other important thing about the tractor is that it's on dual wheels, and we're not working on any slope today, so that's not of any concern, but I do want a very light footprint. Again, it's soft ground, it's a little bit drizzly of a day. I don't want to do any damage to this property that I have to fix later. That's the tractor, and it's going to be the one machine that I use to run all of these attachments. I brought everything I could possibly need for this job because I tried to put my contractor hat on and say, if I didn't personally bid this job, which I didn't, and I was going into it a little bit blind, I saw some photos, I was able to kind of understand the scope. There's going to be a potential for things to get thrown at me that I don't understand or don't know until I get on the property on site. For that reason, I wanted everything with me that I could possibly need, including the bucket, to be able to do this job so I don't have to make any trips back to the shop for more attachments. And that starts with a power rake. The power rake is going to be especially useful if this job is very rough and there's a lot of elevation change in the dirt that is sitting over the trench. This one happens to be fairly settled because it's been sitting for 3-4 months, so it's not as much of a concern, but I am going to run the power rake very briefly to run just about 2 passes before I start with the cultivator because the cultivator is not so much for leveling. So I'm going to rely heavily on the power rake for leveling. The bulk of the work today is going to get done with the cultivator, and that's because I want to be able to bury some of the small debris that's in this trench from being dug up and spread around. There's little bits of sticks and rocks and things that I don't want to have to pick out by my hands. And so the cultivator is going to do a great job of burying those things and leaving a very perfect seed bed in order to plant directly into. The cultivator is important because since we're on an established yard, but we did trench this, or somebody trenched this several months ago, you've got dirt filtering over into established turf. So there's a very wide range of conditions. If you didn't have a cultivator, what you'd end up with is dirt over top of grass and grass growing through it, and it'd be much harder to seed into that and get a good consistent look. What the cultivator is going to do is be able to turn all of the path that we are working in into pure dirt so that we're able to manage it the right way and plant into it effectively. That leads me to the direct seeder that we'll be using. So this is our primary seeder. You can see we use it a lot. It's nice and beat up, but it's going to get the job done and plant directly into this area without having to use any straw to cover it up. It'll do a good job of covering the seed with dirt so that it's not exposed to the outside elements, and we'll get really good germination out of it. And then lastly, I brought a unique attachment that is a little bit above and beyond, but I know a lot of our Ventrac contractors are that way. They like to do a very good job for their customers. They like to be that elite service. And this is a broom specifically to do some cleanup. I don't know if we'll need this, but if we do, then it's going to be really valuable to have because I'm going to eliminate all handwork after the fact. I don't want to have a rake. I don't want to have a push broom. I don't want to have anything out that I have to work hard to do. I want to be able to do it from the seat of the tractor and do it as fast as possible. The broom is going to allow me to be able to go across the edges when we're done, get any dirt that was kicked out into the nice established turf back into the trench and over top of the seeded area so that the customer can ultimately mow this property right away on the areas that are already growing and then eventually mow the areas that we just seeded without any inconsistencies. The broom is also helpful for any areas around the driveway or transitional zones that I drive across with the tractor. If I drag any dirt somewhere else that I don't want it, I'm going to be able to disperse that and get it out of the way, clean it up nicely. So between those attachments and the tractor that I have, we have the ability to do everything that this job requires. If I even wanted to do this job from the very beginning, I would have been able to because we have a trencher for the front of the tractor. So I could have come in, I could have done all the trenching, and then you could have turned that over to the utility company to lay that groundwork and connect those utilities. Everything that we do allows one single person to be able to do any job like this on a private property. Okay, so that's the equipment. Now let's take a walk and look at the actual job site to see what we have to deal with here. And this is a pretty standard setup. There's nothing too crazy about this job. There's not something that's going to be totally unpredictable or anything like that, but it is worth looking at. So we get to the house here. The nice thing about the Ventrac is that I am going to be able to get very close to the house. There's obviously never going to be an ability to get right up next to the structure. So there's going to be some number of inches that you're going to have to deal with in flower beds or whatever. But right into this flower bed area, I can start with the cultivator after I get power rake done, and I can start working this direction. You'll see that this is the challenge here. We've got established turf bleeding into the trenched area. And not only is this something that you want to be mindful of, you have a very difficult way of working with this if you're using hand labor only. Basically, your only options are to add dirt to this and then spread it out, plant in over top, and then hope the grass that's underneath still grows through. The problem is then you're changing the contour of the property. We don't need to do that in this case. Everything is normal as it was before, and we don't really want to start building mounds that don't need to be there and funnel water back towards the house. So having the ability to turn this existing turf over and then plant over top of it in one pass with a cultivator is a huge time savings, and it's going to yield a better looking result when we're done. One thing that we did have the property owner do is mow pretty low to the ground before we started. That's a good practice if you're going to be using a cultivator, because while it does have the ability to turn turf over and end up with raw dirt, if that turf is really tall, it's going to make it work a lot harder and it's just going to go slower. I'm all about speed and efficiency because I want to showcase that you can get in and out of a property like this very quickly with the Ventrac equipment. Over towards the other side where we get closer to the pole, the elevation is pretty consistent. Nothing's going to change dramatically over here. But then as we get over towards the pole itself, there is a neighboring property that also has underground utilities. Those were not marked, unfortunately, during this process, so we don't know exactly where they're at, which means I'm going to cut off use of the power rake just shy of the pole, and I'm going to cut off use of the cultivator before the pole starts to flatten out. Reason being, I don't want to get so deep that I pick up some unknown thing from the neighbor's side. So we'll use the power rake exclusively for the last 10 to 15 feet at the other side, and it'll be good enough so that the grass comes in just fine, but it's something that, again, I don't want to cause extra work for anybody, and I want to be very careful of that. So before you do any of this type of stuff, make sure you always mark your utilities. In order to be able to use the cultivator, you're going to have to go somewhere between 3 and 5 inches deep to be able to get that dirt to turn over and leave that finish that you're looking for. So anything that's higher than that in the ground is at risk if you don't mark it. We have one thing that we have to stay away from here on the right side. So what we'll do is we'll keep the cultivator from going over to those flags, and then we'll use the broom to clean up any spillover dirt so that we don't have to seed into existing turf. All right, that's all there is to know about the property itself. It's time to get to work. We are absolutely finished now, and as you can tell, the Ventrac did a great job. This did take about an hour, just like we expected, and we used every one of the attachments. We started with a power rake just to clean things up, make sure we leveled everything off. I wasn't sure we were going to use that, but it turned out to be pretty necessary to make sure that we had the easiest access with the cultivator. The soil cultivator is very important for this job to make sure that you have a fantastic seed bed. What that's going to do is let this grass grow up fast and really high germination, so it's going to be nice and thick. What you'll notice with the results of this job is that there's nice smooth transitions in and out of the yard now. The homeowner can mow this easily once this grows up, and they're not going to have any rough transitions with their mower. It always amazes me every time I use the Ventrac and the attachments that it comes along with, how good it is at jobs like this. And to be able to do this in 1 hour is such an amazing display of how productive you can be with this machine in a professional capacity. If I was able to stay within this footprint, maybe the city that I'm working in or the county that I'm working in, I could go do another 2 or maybe even 3 jobs yet today with this same attachment setup. And if I could line these things up, it's not always possible if you're a contractor, but if you could line these things up to have a job just like this or similar to this, then you can make a lot of money in a short period of time. So the Ventrac, even though it has that ability to go do rough cut mowing or even finish mowing, aeration, things like that in spring season, it can do these jobs also, and you can really be super productive as a contractor. We get to this point and it's sort of like, how do we give you the punchline? How do we set the hook? And I don't know how to do that other than to just point to what we just did and say, that was less than an hour's worth of work. And I barely had to lift a finger. That's the power of the Ventrac. That's what you get when you own this machine. And the options for working with this machine are limitless. So as always, thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.